Welcome to another how-to video from bugspray.com. This is our part 3 video, which goes over a game plan and how you can eliminate small rodents active in and around the home. In part 1, we talked about what the problem might be, such as a noise in the attic, finding droppings someplace around the home, or seeing something out in the yard that was telling you a small animal was active. In part 1, we also covered how you could pre-bait and establish a feeding station which you could then use to trap the animal. In video 2, we went over a couple of trap options so that you could capture and remove the animals. In this video, we're going to talk about what you can do after the animal activity has ceased. So at this point, we're assuming that you have captured several animals, or maybe the animal activity has simply stopped and it's been inactive for at least 2 weeks. This is now the time that you can proceed with first descenting or deodorizing the structure. We've mentioned this many times, and this has to do with the odors and the scent that animals leave for traveling. Basically the trails and the highways that they have established around the home for getting into the home and then for moving throughout the home. To do this, you'll need this product, TON. This is essentially an odor eliminator. It works by breaking down the odor structure. So at a molecular level, it basically breaks apart the odor molecules, and in turn, there's no odor that's releasing, no volatility, and this means that animals cannot smell either themselves or other animals that were active in the area, and in turn it really dramatically reduces any risk or potential for animals to find the structure and move back inside. This is a pint-sized jug. We sell it in pints, and you'll need 4 ounces to a gallon of water. The coverage will vary depending on where you use it. So if you're applying this mixed up material inside the home, you'll get approximately 1,000 square feet per gallon, which means that this little jug will cover up to 4,000 square feet. And that coverage applies to crawl spaces, attics, a carpet, baseboards, pretty much any place you need to use it. Outside the home, a gallon of mixed material will give you about 500 square feet of coverage. So to use this product, you can apply it with a pump sprayer. You can apply it with a sponge from a bucket. You can mop it on the floor. You can wipe it down on walls or counters. You can put it into one of our fogging machines. We'll have links below for a few different pieces of equipment that you can use to apply it. In general, you're going to want to use this in an attic, in a crawl space, certainly around baseboards, maybe in a pantry, and in the living areas where you use it. Applying it with a sponge or a rag is generally fine. Obviously, spraying it with a pump sprayer is very easy and can be done as well. In crawl spaces and attics, the misting machine, again, a link will be below, is usually the most efficient. You can go into those areas and use a pump sprayer as well, but the goal in those areas is to get complete coverage, and the fogging machine does a great job of that because it carries the product as a mist, and everything is basically covered with the treatment, so there's no missing of any locations. And that's really important, particularly in crawl spaces and attics. Once you've done the inside of the house, you need to go outside and spray around routes of entry. Most homes are going to have at least one side of the house where there's been a penetration or an access point, and that's where you want to focus your applications. Generally speaking, gutters along the roof line where the shingles overhang onto the gutters, corners of the home, around windows and doors, any pipes or conduits that go through walls. These are all common places. Obviously, soffits and vents, whether it goes to a crawl space or an attic, you want to spray there. Spraying the baseboard, or I should say the foundation of the home, and then coming out onto the turf or flower beds and ground cover is also suggested In other words, coming out away from the house at least 5 feet, if not 10 feet, and covering the ground out there is also very important. This treatment will not injure plants, it will not hurt grass, it will not hurt shrubs or trees. Anything that you spray will not be affected. So use it liberally outside after you've done the inside applications. One treatment will do the job, and generally you should be able to see instant results. Even if you have strong odors from the animals, such as a shrew, for example, this will eliminate those scents. So this product has a plethora of uses, and once you've eliminated the activity, again, for at least 2 weeks, you can proceed with this application, descent the home, let it sit for a day, and at that point, you can consider and definitely install at least one of these 2 sound repellers. The first repeller I'm going to discuss is the one that we use both inside and outside the home. This is what we refer to as our above ground unit. And this unit, I'll get into some detail of it now, but for a complete listing of how it can be used and implemented in and around the home, you should go to the product page. Link will be below to see the video specifically on this unit. For now, we're talking about small rodents, and because we're limiting the application to them, I can go over some brief settings to give you an understanding of how this unit will work when applied in your home. This is a great unit for use in an attic or a crawl space. Very easy to employ. It comes with a power supply, and all you need to do is pop off the Tupperware-like back cover. And when you get inside the unit, you'll see that it has about 5 settings. It has a couple of what we call slider switches. It's got 2 small dial settings, and then a main frequency dial setting. So I'll give you a brief overview on this regarding the settings. The first yellow knob that you see here, you want to dial it to be pointing down here. This is where the batteries can be installed, and when set there, it's basically set for rodent control. And this will work on anything from a flying squirrel to a roof rat to a mouse or a vole, even a squirrel. So get that setting pointed in that direction, and then move to the slider applications. The top slider is for 24-hour a day service, daytime only or nighttime only. And in general, we want to have this active 24 hours a day, so you'll slide it to that position. The bottom slider here is for motion sensing, and the unit has a motion sensor up front. We don't want to rely on motion sensing for now. If you're using this inside the home, you would want to use it in either the center, which is constantly on, or constant sweep. Starting with constant on is always the safest and most effective setting, so that's what we suggest you start. These 2 settings will now almost be eliminated. This one is for motion detection, and since the motion detector will not be used, it's irrelevant. This is for audible sound, and before you install the unit in your crawl space or attic, you want to plug it in and make sure that you have this dialed all the way off. It's basically a 0 to 100 decibel level volume control, and when you're running the unit constantly, you don't want to hear anything, so you'll want to have this set to 0. Always plug it in and test it first, and I'm going to do that in a moment so that you can see what it looks like when it's turned on. So again, a quick summary of the settings. You'll have this set to 24 hours. You'll have this slider set in the middle for continuous. Sensor here for the motion detector is irrelevant. This you'll have set to 0, the audible sound volume control. And the frequency setting will be pointed at rodents, which is basically pointing down right at the C battery compartment space here. Now, as I indicated before, the unit comes with this power supply, and you will need to run power to this. The power draw on these are minimal. We're talking a couple of watts, and it may only cost 25 to 50 cents a month to operate, so it's very inexpensive. But you will need power. If you deploy this in a crawl space, you'll need to get an extension cord to run in there. If you're plugging it in up in the attic and you have, for example, an outlet there, great. If you don't, and you have just a light bulb, you can buy an adapter for a light bulb socket that you remove the light bulb, you screw in the adapter. The adapter will receive the light bulb, but it has an outlet on the side of it. It's not designed for high-powered devices, but something that pulls as little as this unit can easily plug into that adapter, and you will not be overloading the circuit. So you can get power up there pretty easily with that adapter, or you can run extensions. We also have extension cords for this power supply, which is basically a male and female speaker wire type cable, so that one end plugs in here and the other into the sound repeller. Those cables come in 33-foot lengths and 66-foot lengths, so you can extend the reach of this from, say, a living space up into the attic pretty easily with one of those extensions. As far as the battery compartments, again, generally speaking, not for use inside the home. Always use the power supply, and once you've got the unit plugged in and the back cover on, the sound repeller can be placed on a box, it can be placed on a shelf. Keeping it 6 inches or a foot off the ground is suggested, and there's a few rules that you have to understand about the sound that's being emitted from these, and this is important because a lot of people don't understand how ultrasound works. First and foremost, it's very directional. So if we have it pointed in this direction, it is projecting like a flashlight. And like a flashlight, the band of sound will get wider as it leaves the unit. Are you getting 180-degree coverage from here, meaning everything on that side of the unit? Not really. You're probably getting something like 120 to 150 degrees. And for that reason, if you have a really large attic, you might have to set units back to back and get coverage over the entire attic by having 2 units installed. One unit can cover 4,000 to 5,000 square feet outside in the yard because it's a wide open space. Ultrasound does not do a good job of going around things. So if you have tray ceilings, if you have a lot of rafters, if you have a lot of things in the way in your attic, boxes and storage, for example, this sound will not wrap around and give you a complete protected area, even if you're pointing it at those objects. It's only going to work in line of sight. So keep that in mind. Tray ceilings in particular can provide dead zones. Many small rodents will move behind tray ceilings and live there very happily with these units going off in other areas of the attic. So consider that when you're making your installations. Make sure that you have enough units up there. You can run 4 or 5 units off of one power outlet. So the power demand will not be much if you have or have a desire or a need to have extra units up there. The key here for all applications is to focus on the route of entry or the point of entry where you suspect the animal was most active and coming into the attic. If you start there, you can almost always ensure that you have good protection from any animal that might find that spot again in the future. Now, these units can also be used outside, and in that application, what you would do is, again, consider going with the power supply. But if you're dealing with, say, something like a ground squirrel or a gray squirrel, those animals are active during the day. And for that application, you wouldn't need the power supply. You could go to batteries, which would be 4 C cells, and you can change these settings. So for example, you can change this to daytime only. You can change it to nighttime only, but if we're dealing with a daytime animal, go to daytime only, and you can go to motion sensor, which is all the way over to the one side. And at that point, you can dial up the motion sensor setting so that the unit can then see and become activated for seeing animals up to 30 or 40 feet away. And it has a little red light here underneath this cover so that when it sees something, it will basically become red and you'll be able to know that it's picking up motion. On the outside of the home for daytime use, again, the sensor, letting it go on when it's battery powered is by far the best setting for squirrels and chipmunks. And you'll still leave the frequency setting here, pointing at the battery compartment for rodents. And as far as the audible sound, you don't need to use that when we're dealing with those animals, but you could. Remember, if the unit is not going off much, and maybe once or twice a day, it doesn't stay on long. And so once it turns on, it's going to be loud. assuming that you dial this up to 20 or 40 decibels. Obviously, if you turn it to 60 or 80, it's going to be really loud. And for use around neighborhoods where there's homes close to one another, we recommend the setting of 20 to 40 decibels. That's almost always going to be plenty high, but you can dial it up higher. And if you're in a remote location, say on a farm or something, and you have large animals, the higher setting is almost always required. But for small rodents, you don't even need the audible sound. It is an option, and you can employ it. So at this point, I have power, and I'm going to now plug this in. And this is more for demonstration purposes. Once you've plugged in the power supply, the unit will begin its initiation power setup, and that happens by seeing this little red light come on. And this will take probably 30 seconds to 45 seconds before it becomes actuated. Now remember, for inside the home, we want to have it set to 24 hours a day. We want to have it to constant, and we want to have it set to where we're not hearing anything as far as the audible sound. So as you can see right here, I start to dial this up, it can become quite loud. We don't want that, so we want to turn this all the way down and rely on nothing but the ultrasound. And right now you're seeing how it activates during the constant sound on. I'm not sure if the video will pick up any sound. I can barely hear anything. The frequency range is predominantly out of the sound of any adult. Children can hear it, certainly in the room that the unit is on. So if they were in the attic, they would be able to hear it. But assuming that the unit's in an attic and there's no one up there, they won't be able to hear it because it's in an area that they're not at. And remember, this does not penetrate through walls. The flashing LED is a really good feature and super helpful for use in attic spaces in particular, and crawl spaces, because it's, again, very irritating to the animals, and it is part of the unit. It will activate during the night with that LED, and even though it's light inside this room where I'm filming, the sensor on this is a true photo sensor that only picks up UV. So inside the house, it senses the situation that we have now as being what we would call nighttime. And as nighttime, that means that it's always going to go on, and it's always going to turn on the LED because there's no UV in here. It's just standard iridescent light bulbs. The unit is pretty much quiet for any adult, and it does not harm anything. In other words, it's not damaging your ears, it's not going to hurt your pets. You don't have to worry about even the animals being injured or harmed. It is irritating, and in particular to small animals because of that frequency. So they will not be comfortable where they continuously hear this. So when we're using this with the power always on, you'll always see this happening, meaning that the LED will be going off, you'll see the red light on, you'll hear a slight little bit of electronical sound coming from the solid state board that's inside there, and every 30 to 45 seconds the unit will shut off, and then it will reboot and start all over again. So it's constantly cycling. If you change the mode to constant sweep, there's a different set of sounds that go off. That's generally not needed for small rodents, so you don't have to use that setting. We recommend that for some of the larger animals, and in particular for use outside. When we go to battery power, the unit will not be going on all the time, and if you try to use it with batteries and power it on all the time, there would be problems. There would be problems because the unit would basically use up the batteries, and there would be no power within a day or two. That's just what happens. It's not designed to run continuously on battery only. So continuous mode can only be powered by the power supply. Keep that in mind, very important. And lastly, when you're putting this back together again, meaning the back cover, the fitting of this for some people is tricky, but it's just like putting on a piece of Tupperware, right? So what you need to do is just kind of push down the edges of the plastic side as you push the Tupperware top over the edges. And if you do that by pushing down the sides, you can get it to fit snugly. And at this time, I feel like I need to mention that we do have an optional mounting block. So in addition to optional power cords, you can also get a mounting block which allows you to hang the unit. And this is handy for many applications, particularly outside. The mounting block has 2 screws which fit nicely right into the back holes that are on that plastic Tupperware cover. And what's unique about the mounting block is that it has a hole here. This 1/2-inch hole can take, for example, a piece of rebar that you can slide into the ground and then elevate the unit 6 inches, a foot or so off the ground, so it's elevated and protected from the wetness and elements down there and still able to do its job. In the attic, you don't really need the mounting block. The unit can be placed on a box. It could be just placed on the floor. It can be tilted against the box, for example, and pointed up, and it will still be doing its job. So inside the house, mounting block is not so important. The only added advantage of using it inside the house is that you can connect the mounting block here, and then you can connect a unit on the back side of the mounting block. So you can literally apply units back to back, which is kind of handy because it's just neat. They go like that, and you have a complete coverage. Of course, in the yard, this is really handy as well. So the mounting block is an added feature that many times makes the installation a lot smoother, but it's not required. It's just an optional piece. You'll see it listed below as well. So that covers everything, again, on the above ground unit. And if you need more details for other animals, because this will work for a wide range of animals, just click on the product page link below, and then on that page you'll see a more in-depth video on this unit. For in-the-ground rodents such as chipmunks and voles, shrews, moles, for example, anything that you've been seeing activity where there's tunneling, this is the unit that you'll want to employ. This unit is a solar-powered device. It comes in 2 pieces when it arrives. The top piece controls most of the electronics. It has the battery, and there is a rechargeable battery inside this compartment. Over the years, the battery will wear out, so eventually you'll need to replace this, but you should expect to get 2 to 3 years of recharging with this. The solar panel needs to be seeing light, and for this unit to properly charge the battery, it should get someplace around 3 to 4 hours of sunlight a day. If you're not able to get adequate sunlight, we do have these units that can run off of D-cell batteries, and you'll need those for shady areas. But in general, if you have just 3 to 4 hours of sunlight, you can get these charged up properly and have them fully functional without you having to do anything other than installing them, turning them on, and letting them do their job. The units come with a solar panel, so when they arrive, you need to charge the battery. To do that, you want to place these in a window where they're getting at least 3 to 4 hours of sunlight a day. And if you're only getting that little bit of sunlight, let it charge for 3 days. If you're getting 8 to 10 hours of sunlight, 2 days of charging will be fine. Once the unit is properly charged, you can take it outside and do the installation. Before you make the installation, you'll want to have a hole, and that hole needs to be about this deep. So you want to expose about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, or leave 1 inch to 1.5 inches up top. You don't want this unit all the way down in the ground. The other thing that you might consider is an earth auger. This is what you would hook up to a hand drill, and you can then use to drill out a hole that will be a perfect size for this. It's about 1.5 inches wide, and this earth auger does a great job of making the holes. It works with cordless drills or power drills. And once you got your holes, once the head unit is charged, going ahead and making the installation is very easy. So inside the ground stake, if you kind of shake it a little bit, you'll see that we have a little USB cord connector. And what you'll need to do is connect this to the head unit. If you look here, you'll see it slides in. And once it's plugged in, you can then take the cord and just kind of feed it down into the ground stake. And once you've fed it in there adequately, you can take the head unit and slide it over the stake. It doesn't snap in place, it just kind of fits snugly, and that's all that's required. On the bottom of the head unit, it has some LED lights and it has an off-on switch. So when you are ready to install these, what you want to do is take this outside. The best time to deploy them is close to dark, and the reason for that is when you turn it on, it will turn on the lights, the LEDs, and in the middle of the day when it's sunny, it's difficult to see that. And this unit has a few settings. Again, if you go to the product page, you'll be able to see more specifically the different settings and what they mean. For our purposes, what you want to do is only hit this button once, and hitting it once, you'll see the lights go on, and then you're going to hear a rattle, you're going to hear a siren, a little bit of a audible sound. So it has a few sounds that all work together, and that's what you want to use when deploying these around the home. So make your holes where you've seen the tunnel activity, and once you've done that and ready to install, bring the unit out, connect the head, and simply turn this on, one little click, and you'll see the lights, you hear that rattle, and the unit is at this point turned on and ready to go. So you know that it's working, and you know that you can make your installation. To make the installation, you don't want to do it with the head on there. So we're going to go ahead and take that all apart, and you're going to take this ground stake and you're going to push it down into your hole. Don't force it in too heavily, and certainly don't hammer the top with anything that would damage it. This is not designed for that. You need to use the earth auger to make the hole wide enough so this unit just slides in smoothly, and you get it down to about here. So once you've got about 1.5 inches to 2 inches left up top, you're ready to connect your headpiece and turn the unit on. So at this point, you've got the unit in the ground, or I should say the ground stake in the ground. You can now slide the head cover over it and activate the unit by pressing that button. Once you've done that, it will turn on. You'll hear the little siren, you'll see the lights go, and you heard that rattle. Now, the unit is active 24 hours a day. When it first gets dark, it has a little photo sensor, so it knows it's dark, and during that time period, the lights will go off every approximately once a minute. It's about every 45 seconds to a minute, and it will cycle through the lights and the siren and the rattling and the ultrasound. So there's 3 or 4 sounds that it's setting off, and it's doing this about every 45 seconds to a minute. Right now it's on, and because we saw those lights going on, it's going to rotate the sound as I indicated. So you just heard that rattle. When that rattle is going off in the ground, it's very irritating to any ground animal, and by itself is almost always enough to keep them away and not want to reuse those tunnels. Keep these units active where the tunnels were initially, and after 2 weeks or 3 weeks with no activity in those tunnels, you can then take these out and move them further out in the yard, eventually getting them to right at your property border, or at least where you don't want new invaders. The short list includes chipmunks, voles, gophers, shrews, ground squirrels. It also works on snakes. And for example, even a iguana. If you have a iguana laying out in the sun, you can place these out in those areas of the yard, and the iguana don't like these, so that they will keep them from going there. So a lot of applications, but initially you want to place them where the tunnels have been, and once you've removed or relocated those animals and these units are placed out there, the existing tunnels that they've been treated with the TON odor neutralizer should not be found by new animals, and combined with something like this making it very uncomfortable for any new animal, they should never get reoccupied. And this is how you keep your yard free and clear of new rodent infestations. So get these installed initially right where the tunnels were, and after that you can move them further out in the yard along the property borderlines and keep animals from coming into the yard at all. The other settings that are on this will reduce the amount of sounds or vibration that are coming out. So every time you click this, at this point all you're going to get now will be the siren, and if you were to go to the final setting, all you would get is the rattling. So if one is preferred, in other words, if you prefer the rattle and you don't want the siren, you can cycle to that setting. But in general, we always want you to have the unit activated the very first time, meaning just the one click. And when you do that and you see the lights go on, leave it at that. You're now getting all the functionality that the unit can provide, and that's what we suggest. So thank you for watching this third video in our 3-video series of how to keep rodents away from your home. I hope you found this to be instructional, and I hope that it solves your problem. And if you have further questions, you can give us a call or send us an email, support@bugspray.com, and we'll be glad to further assist.